Welcome to Accelerate Your Wealth, a podcast by Rebecca Robertson, founder and director of Evolution Financial Planning. This series, we're focusing on female financial independence, looking towards a stronger financial future. Be sure to let us know your thoughts on the show, and please do connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram, or head over to www.rebeccarobertson.co.uk.
So in today's podcast, I'm going to be talking to Sandra Ten Hoope, who is a successful corporate lawyer, toxic relationship awareness advocate and author, who is using her experience of surviving not one, but 3 abusive relationships to help other professional women rewrite their stories. In her book, Do Not Try Him at Home, she recalls her near-death experience at the hands of her partner, abuser of the time, who unleashed a brutal and sustainable attack lasting 6 hours. In this honest account, Sandra reveals the extent of her living a double life. She spent many years hiding the truth of what was happening to her colleagues, to her friends and her family. And like many professional women in toxic relationships, by the day she'd be closing multi-million-pound deals in the boardroom, but once she left the office at home, she would barely look up from fear of what would happen. But Sandra has other women who know that are absolutely no way out and that they will not be themselves again. She's helping raise awareness and vital funds to the UK charity Women's Aid, of which she is a media spokesperson. £1 from the book sales will be donated to them. Sandra is now using her experience and extensive corporate mentoring and coaching skills to help women recognise these patterns of abuse and rebuild themselves one step at a time. So Sandra's going to be talking to us a little bit about her story and sharing some things that you could be looking out for potentially in your relationships or for your friends, girlfriends, mothers and daughters, etc. And today's title of the show is Financial Control Isn't Just for Stay-at-Home Mums. Enjoy. Welcome, Sandra, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a true privilege to be here.
Oh no, of course. I've read your bio out and I've told people about you. So very much a privilege to have you. So talk to me about why Women's Aid.
Well, in the run-up to the launch of my book, my PR agent, Nicola Rowley, she had contacted Women's Aid. Right. And she got in touch with them and she gave them a sort of description of what the book would be about. And that I intended to support them by donating, as I still do, £1 for every purchased book to Women's Aid. And they kindly sent a lovely review that was read out on the day of the publication. And afterwards, I got in touch with their sort of speakers bureau, so to say, and they asked me if there would be journalists who were interested in this kind of story, if those could contact me through Women's Aid, as has happened a couple of times so far. I truly love what they are doing to support and empower women. There's a few friends in the entrepreneurial realm who went through similar experiences I have with respect to domestic violence, who are based in the UK, and who made it quite clear that without the aid of Women's Aid, they would not be here today. Amazing. When they were either in the relationship or trying to get out of the relationship or were just out of the relationship, Women's Aid could give guidance on a lot of legal, financial issues, but also provide sort of hands-on care, be it in a safe house or other kind of support groups that help them to get balanced again, and even now have a good life for themselves. Many have kids, be it as a mom, but also as a business owner, that it would not have had without Women's Aid.
Amazing.
And there are similar organizations in the Netherlands where I'm based, who I also support. But as my book is written in English, and my sort of business existence, so to speak, and also friends existence, so to speak, is usually in the UK or other English-speaking countries, I figured that giving the proceeds to Women's Aid would be a lot clearer for those who buy the book than if it'd been just a Dutch organization.
I understand. No, it's brilliant. It is an amazing charity, and it's something that my business supports as well. So for yourself, you've sort of, a lot of people think when you're in an abusive relationship, or you're in a long-standing relationship, I've spoken to a lot of women that, you know, they've had children, and then therefore they've taken a step back from their careers, they've taken a step back to look after the children, and often they're with people I'd like to describe as maybe an older outlook as to what women should be doing, so how they should be looking after the home, how they should be running things. And I'm not saying women shouldn't then have a successful, busy career, but that sort of as a couple, that's a decision that they've made jointly, or, you know, it might be the women's choice that that's what they want to do for that period of time. A lot of the women I've spoken to so far in the podcast series are now very successful at what they do, but they weren't when they were in the abusive relationship, or even maybe just before they went into the abusive relationship. Whereas yourself, you were in a very successful boardroom environment, and obviously you're then going home to find yourself not being able to look up and look the person in the eye, and really sort of two personalities in a very sort of successful background, very successful career. So it doesn't really matter culturally where you come from. It doesn't matter financially how your financial standing is, or what your career CV looks like. This happens to women from all backgrounds, doing all kinds of things and in all kinds of ways. And I'd just love to hear from you, how did that all start? So did you know before that you was in that kind of relationship?
Well, the thing is, people have this view on what is an abusive relationship and where does it happen. They have this idea that it happens in a certain area, like certain neighborhoods, not the best of neighborhoods, to women who are indeed not working or are in low-paid jobs, and that's where it's supposed to happen. And that's sort of the idea that I grew up with as well. I never thought that, you know, as a professional, high-achieving, high-earning woman, I could end up in such a relationship. Also, people think that abuse is just being hit in the face or other parts of your body, and that would be obvious, and then you would leave. But that is not how it starts in any abusive relationship, because then it'd be clear. It starts, you're being wooed in a magnificent way, and then slowly but surely, firstly, the emotional abuse starts. And you might be drawn to a certain dynamic in a relationship because of how you grew up, or because of your culture, or a combination of all that. So it might take you a long time to realize what's going on, especially if, like I did at the workplace, I was being me. I was doing the things I was doing, and I was doing them well. I had good relationships with my co-workers. So for me to realize that something was really off at home, it did take a long time. It might have taken until the first hit in the face. And when that happened, not just are you physically hurt, you're emotionally hurt, and shame kicks in. Because how could this happen to someone like myself?
Yeah.
How could it happen to someone who's outspoken, who does her job well, who does dare to speak up in a corporate environment? How could this happen? I thought I was the only woman in the professional world who this had ever happened to.
Yeah.
So shame is a huge factor. Shame is not just for the professional woman thinking, oh my God, I've got something weird going on at home. Shame is the biggest part for all women, also men. There is also men who are in an abusive relationship, but I come from a man-woman relationship background. So that's
what you
and
understand.
that's
And statistically, there are women who are abusive to their partners, and that could be same sex or different sex relationships. But statistically, it is that much higher in a male and female environment, and the male being the abuser.
Yeah, and ultimately, when you can speak to women who are either still in a relationship or out of that relationship, they will say that they were too ashamed to owe up to it. Not just maybe because of their own background, maybe they came from a very loving family, maybe they are high achieving, or any of the stories that we're being told that it would be impossible for you to land in an abusive relationship. But also the men that they are with, the men that I was with, these are, to the outside world, the nice blokes, the social blokes, the funny blokes, gosh, that's a good looking, nice, wonderful man that you're with.
Yeah. So is there a part here somewhere where you don't want it to be true? And is there a part here where you also think that maybe it's you and not actually yourself?
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's the outside world who would find it hard to see it. But the abuser, I always say there's the likes of Dynamo and other people who play with your mind. And if you were to go to a show of like Dynamo and you come up on stage and they play with your perception, everybody knows. And they might laugh with you if you're subject to one of his tricks. But you go back into the audience and no one will say, how stupid of you not to see what's going on. Because nobody can truly see what's going on. You just know that they play with perception. Well, that's exactly what an abuser does. He plays with your perception.
Yeah.
So he knows exactly how to position himself, but also how you end up positioning yourself, feeling very confused, feeling very ashamed.
Yeah.
Because this is basically what they do, either for a liking or a living. This is what they are. Sure. And they have this down to a T. It's very hard to protect yourself against someone who systematically tries to gaslight you. That's the term used.
How does it work with finances in this scenario? So for yourself, this is different for everybody because it does depend on the makeup of the relationship. But financially, what tends to happen in the conversations I've had with people so far is that they're not working, the female's not working as much, not earning as much, and therefore they are more reliant on the other person. So they can't leave because they are financially stuck. They're not financially independent. They're not able to leave. And therefore, financially, they're having to sort of sweet talk the person to be able to get money. But I've also heard stories where there are females where the money would go into like a joint account or into their partner's account even, and they weren't allowed it. It was like it wasn't their money in effect. And I mean in a controlling way. I don't mean that in a, where it all gets spent on the kids kind of way. I mean it literally is all, they're not allowed access to it, which is economic and financial abuse, which in the UK is actually, that's a very clear violation of, it's actually it's illegal to do that now. But even to the extent, if you were stopped from working, you were stopped from being financially independent, you were stopped in any way of having access, even to a car to go to a job, for example, that would be economic abuse in the UK. It's now illegal to do that. Which is a reason for bringing that up. I just think it's a really important point. I don't think a lot of people realise actually how far we've progressed in this area in the last 3 or 4 years. But for you, how was that for you financially? Where did that all sit?
Well, for me, if we concentrate on what I would say the main abuser in my book, where physical violence played a huge part, I ended up supporting him. Because he wasn't working, or he wasn't in a steady working environment. So I supported him, I supported his house, but it came down ultimately to me not having the full control of those finances. I recall once being hit severely because he had found out that I'd lent money to a friend. The friend had meanwhile repaid it, but he thought it was unfair in whatever way. So even though a lot of things were in my name, I paid for all that he needed. And ultimately, he did some stupid things that led to a lot of damages for which I was legally responsible. So even though I had my own,
I do hear a lot of people going to get into a lot of debt, and then it affects the other person, and I know people have got bankrupt and all sorts of things because of it.
Yeah. So I was very close to have been bankrupt, and I paid in damages for a great number of years. For me, it's also sort of a warning sign. When a friend, she introduced me to a lady who was setting up her own business, and then I saw a Facebook post about her cheering on how her then boyfriend was taking care of all the finances. And I was something energetically off. And I said to my friend, I said, she is in trouble, or she's going to be in trouble. And my friend said, are you sure? Because he's the nicest guy, and so supportive of her in her business. I said, trust me on this one. But obviously, years later now, it's come to light that he has run up with the money and treated her really bad. And it's a very painful divorce, also with respect to the kid. But there was this one post in which she was saying, oh, no, he takes care of all of that because, then I don't have to worry about it. And I was like, oh, gosh, no. But
red flag.
A red flag. But obviously for me to recognize it, my knowledge comes with a price tag attached. That there's still a part of me that wishes for no person on this planet to understand where I'm coming from. But alas, from the statistics, I know that's not true. There's a lot of women, like you said, either who are making their own money or for now in a situation in which they, for instance, look after the kids and are not making money, which is equally valuable. End up in a situation in which they have no say over their money or are liable for damages for years to come, even if they found a point to let the perpetrator go.
Yeah. So can you name any other sort of obvious red flags? So you mentioned one there being, how he takes care of me, he looks after all the money, I don't have to deal with anything, which goes against my female financial independence. I don't believe in advocating your financial responsibility to anyone or any person. Equally, doesn't matter who you are, male, female, working, not working. But are there any other red flags that you would think of?
Well, when it comes to a joint account, if there is one, and you start off on a seemingly balanced ground, maybe the two of you are working, maybe one is working, the other is not. But on a joint account, just make sure that you have insight through an app on a daily basis or a weekly basis if you go through your accounts, so you truly know what's going on. Because there's a lot of women, even though like they're with husbands who are maybe also a professional or a business owner and think that everything is in order. Just make sure that you have an insight. And if that is not granted on joint account.
Yeah.
And that would be a huge red flag. Depending on your circumstances, it's not always about demanding it, because you could end up in a dangerous situation, but recognize it for yourself as something that is off balance.
Yeah.
And if so, there are ways to seek help, to discuss your situation, like Women's Aid, like other organizations, who could then help you make a step plan if you decide that it's so off balance that you wish to leave this relationship.
Okay.
Because finances are a sort of, it's an abusive tool.
Yeah.
It can do a lot of damage. And like we, touched upon earlier, abuse is way more than being physically hit.
Totally.
It's emotional abuse, it's financial abuse, it's sexual abuse, it's physical abuse. And there are elements, in some relationships there will be one element, in other relationships there will be all elements. But any element that makes you feel not worthy or not seen or not heard, that makes you wonder, that makes you feel guilty, that makes you feel ashamed, all of those, take those signs seriously.
Brilliant. That's really good advice. I think that's really good advice. So how did you change things? Because you haven't just been in one abusive relationship, you've been in 2, 3.
I've been in 3, all with a bit of different flavor to it.
Did it get easier to get out as you got more experience in doing that?
It ultimately did get easier to get out, because the final one was with the biological father of my child. And from meeting him to divorcing him, we only have like a 3.5-year period in which we also had my son. So it does get easier. I must say that in that final relationship, physical abuse did not play a part. But it does get it. Yeah, it was a lot easier for me to say, this is where my boundaries are.
Yeah.
If I'd not fallen pregnant, it would have lasted a lot, maybe even a year and a half.
Right.
Because it was way easier to see the signs.
Yeah.
And to act upon those, and to realize, this is what I'll accept and this is what I won't accept.
Yeah. I mean, when I was being brought up, my dad always said, don't have children until you get married, because I came from a very Catholic upbringing. However, what I say to my daughter is being married is really important, because you're committed to each other, and I do believe in the sacrilege of marriage. That's just sort of like a foundation sort of feeling for me personally, although there's certainly no judgment for those that don't choose not to. If anything, it helps for tax purposes. I also think that it's more important, and what I'm teaching my daughter is to be financially independent, because whenever you do choose to then have children, if you're not in a strong financial position, it is a time of where you need to focus on somebody else other than yourself. And therefore, if you haven't got the right support and the right financial support around you, family support, friend support, etc., then you are in a sort of a very vulnerable position. It doesn't make you weak, but you are vulnerable. So it's making sure you have the right structures. And I'm all for being, your partner being supportive, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're not giving yourself future options. So offering to never work again, giving up the job that you love and not thinking about leaving the door open to maybe go back part-time, or not doing any marketing in your business the whole time because you just don't know if you're going to be able to handle it, or when you have the baby that you're finding it a bit of a struggle, get some help. Make sure that you're keeping the wheels on the track on the train, so you're keeping things going, so that you've still got a little bit of momentum. Don't always fully shut the door, isn't my only advice, because you want to have options. And it's not being financially independent in the full sense of necessarily having £1 million in the bank, but it just means if you needed a few £100s to have a day off, or go and stay in a hotel, or have a break and have a little holiday, or take the kids away, or whatever it might be, or buy the shoes that you want and the coat that you want without having to ask for money, then that's what we should be doing.
Fully agree. Financial freedom gives options, the option to leave if necessary, also the option to, if you decide to leave, build a future for yourself on your own terms. It is so very important that we teach our children to, I think that from financial freedom, you can have a way more balanced and sound relationship, because that part, there is no necessity to be together from a financial viewpoint. And it really comes down to being a good fit, to supporting each other, also in an emotional way. I'm not saying that you should never join finances, or if the relationship is sound, and that is also can be a very sound thing to do, invest in things together, but just make sure that if things go off balance, that you don't have to stay from a financial viewpoint.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I've really enjoyed our chat today. I know you need to shoot off. Would you like to tell people just about your book and a little bit about what you cover? And obviously I will share links in the description below for those listening on my podcast, on my blog, so you can go and check out the book, which is Do Not Try Him at Home.
Exactly. That just came to me at some point, because obviously you see all those DIY programs, and then it just hit me. Do not try him at home. And it covers 3 relationships, one with a womanizer, one with what I refer to as the abuser, because there was physical abuse, in that relationship and one with an addict. And all three had massive challenges. And ultimately, I'm glad that I'm in neither of those anymore. And my main aim is to raise awareness that there are various types of abuse and it can happen to anybody.
Definitely.
Notwithstanding profession, nationality, age, the type of relationship that you're in. And if there is awareness, then others might wake up earlier than I have done.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you
and I
so
wish you all the luck with your book. Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.